The city never truly sleeps. It just murmurs differently after dark. Less talk of ambition, more whispers of regret. I had just moved into a crumbling apartment complex on the edge of downtown, a stone's throw away from where the high-rises surrendered to narrow alleyways and rusted fire escapes. Rent was cheap. Too cheap. But at the time, I told myself it was just part of the city's charm. I told myself a lot of things back then, none of them true. It started on a Thursday night. A thin drizzle painted the sidewalks in silver. I was walking home from the night shift, fast food grease still clinging to my skin like a second layer. That's when I saw him. A man hunched against the brick wall of the liquor store across from my building. At first glance, he looked like any other beggar. Layers of torn clothing, cracked hands clutching a rusted tin cup. But there was something off. His head was always bowed, chin nearly touching his chest, hidden beneath a torn hood that looked older than the building behind him. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just existed, like a permanent fixture of the sidewalk. Every night, without fail, he was there. Always in the same spot, always with his head down. And the strangest part? No one ever acknowledged him. People passed, stepped around him, avoided that section of sidewalk entirely. Even the pigeons gave him a wide berth. I assumed it was just urban apathy until I saw the warning. Someone had spray-painted a message above the liquor store's doorway. Faded red letters, half-washed by rain, but still legible in the glow of the flickering street lamp. Don't look the beggar in the eyes. I thought it was a joke, maybe a prank, some twisted attempt at dark humor. But the next morning, I noticed something chilling. The message was gone, scrubbed clean, no trace left. But the beggar? Still there. Same posture. Same silence. Curiosity is a dangerous thing. You think it makes you brave, clever even. But in truth, it's just another shade of foolishness. I tried to ignore him. For days, I walked the long way around. I avoided eye contact. But he became magnetic. I found myself glancing, just to make sure he was still there. I would stare at the curve of his spine, the stillness of his hands. And then I started to notice more. Birds wouldn't land near him. No insects buzzed around his corner, even in the thick summer heat. Trash blew across the streets but never touched him. He existed in a pocket of dead air, a silence that moved with him. And one night, that silence followed me home. I was in my apartment, alone. My roommate had moved out days earlier, leaving me with a pile of unpaid bills and a silence I'd come to cherish. But that night, I heard something. A scraping. Soft, like fingers trailing along the outside of my door. Then a knock, just one. Gentle. Then silence again. I approached slowly, peered through the peephole. No one was there. I opened the door. The hallway was empty, quiet. But just before I closed it, I looked down and found a penny. Just one, placed carefully in the center of my welcome mat. It looked old, too old. The face was worn smooth, edges dull. I left it there, and that was my first mistake. The next night, I saw the beggar move. He hadn't so much as flinched in weeks, but that night as I passed, I saw his fingers twitch. Just once. Barely. But it was enough to freeze my steps. Then came the whisper. So faint I almost thought it was the wind. Almost looked. I spun around. But the street was empty. And the beggar? Still hunched. Still silent. Something changed after that. I began having dreams. Long corridors with no doors. Whispers coming from behind the walls. Faces without eyes. And always the sound of coins hitting pavement. I would wake up with the taste of copper in my mouth, and more pennies, each morning a new one on my mat. By the end of the week I had a dozen, all dull, all ancient. I threw them out, burned them even, but they returned. I tried talking to neighbors, asked if anyone else noticed the beggar. Most of them brushed me off. One old woman on the third floor simply muttered, "He chooses," and shut her door in my face. The isolation crept in. My phone stopped working. Wi-Fi became spotty. Lights flickered when I got near. And each night the knock returned. One. Just one. And always that single penny. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. I started counting the coins. And then came the night I almost looked. I was coming home late, rain falling hard this time, thick and heavy. As I passed the liquor store, I paused. My eyes drifted toward the beggar. I told myself I wouldn't. I knew the rule. I knew what was written. But something pulled at me. A thread in the chest, and my gaze lifted. Not all the way. Just enough to see beneath the hood. Just enough to see his lips move. "You're next." I ran. No hesitation. No turning back. I ran like something ancient and wicked had just spoken my name. My breath tore through my chest, ragged and sharp, and every step echoed with the weight of a warning too late. I didn't stop until I reached the safety of my apartment, slammed the door, and slid down against it, heart pounding a rhythm only fear could write. My hands trembled as I locked every bolt, shoved a chair beneath the handle, and pulled the curtains shut so tightly that not even the moon could peek through. For hours I sat in the dark, listening, waiting. But the knock never came. No whisper, no coin, nothing. And that silence was worse. Because silence isn't the absence of sound, it's the presence of waiting. Something was out there, watching, deciding. I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it. The voice, the movement, the words, but deep down I knew I hadn't. The rules had been clear. I broke them. By morning the city felt different, like the air had thickened, grown heavy with secrets. I went to work, half blind with exhaustion, hoping the rhythm of routine would ground me. But the moment I stepped outside, I noticed something horrifying. The beggar was gone. His corner was empty. No cup, no blanket, no trace, as if he had never existed. But the warning was back. Fresh paint, bold red. Don't look the beggar in the eyes. My stomach turned. It hadn't been there the day before. Someone, or something, wanted the rule remembered. At work, I tried to focus, but the world seemed wrong. Coworkers avoided my gaze. My name wasn't on the staff list anymore. Emails bounced back with errors. Even my manager asked who I was and told me they had no record of my employment. I laughed, nervous, confused. But no one else laughed with me. I left before lunch, certain that if I stayed, I'd disappear from more than just the system. Back in my apartment, I tried to call my mother. My phone rang once, then static. And through the noise, I heard it. Faint. Barely there. A coin dropping. Then nothing. I threw the phone across the room. It shattered, screen bleeding light. That night, the knock came again. But this time, it wasn't gentle. It was urgent, demanding. A second, then a third. A rhythm. Knock, knock, knock. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The chair beneath the handle shook. The door trembled slightly as though something massive pressed against it, testing it. Then came the voice, soft as before but clearer now. "You saw. You owe." I screamed, even though I knew no one would hear. My building was filled with ghosts in the shape of tenants. People who locked their doors, avoided eye contact, and never spoke above a whisper. No one would help. I was alone. Except for the penny. Waiting on the floor inside the door. This one was different. Shiny. New. My birth year engraved into its surface. I didn't touch it. I started researching, looking for similar cases, urban legends, anything. Most forums dismissed stories like mine as delusion or drug-fueled paranoia. But in a dark corner of the internet, buried deep beneath clickbait and memes, I found a thread. It was archived, years old, titled simply, "The Beggar." There were only a few posts, all by different users. Each described a figure on the street, always silent, always hunched, always avoided, and each one ended with the same line. I looked, now he follows. The last post was a photo, blurry, taken at night. A figure, barely visible, standing at the end of a hallway. No face, just a shadow with eyes that seemed to pierce through the screen. I backed away from my laptop, heart racing. The photo started to distort, glitching into static. And in that static, I saw it again. The coin. Falling. Spinning. Stopping. The days blurred. I stopped going outside. I boarded my windows, taped blackout curtains to every wall. I used headphones to drown out the whispers, but even music couldn't keep them out. They spoke through the rhythm, through the silence between notes. I hadn't eaten in days. My body felt weak, bones hollowed by fear. Then the dreams returned, only they weren't dreams anymore. They were memories of places I'd never been, faces I'd never seen, a church crumbling and soaked in candle wax, a figure kneeling before the altar, hands outstretched, palms up, each one holding a coin, the beggar, cloaked in shadow, standing behind them, always behind. I woke with blood on my pillow, not mine. It smelled like iron, old, like rust and graves, and beside my bed was the penny again, cleaned, polished, gleaming in the morning light. I screamed until my voice cracked. I couldn't take it anymore. So I did what no one else had dared. I went back to the alley, back to his corner. It was night again. Always night now. The city dimmed itself when I walked. Lights flickered off above me. Doors locked as I passed. The world recoiled from my presence, as if I carried a plague no one could name. And then I saw him. He was waiting, but he wasn't alone. Behind him stood a line, a dozen, maybe more, all hunched, all hooded, all with faces turned downward, silent, still. The beggar raised his head, slowly, deliberately, and I saw his eyes. They weren't eyes, they were holes. Deep, endless pits that reached back into something that predated the city, the streets, the stars. He raised his hand, palm open. A penny rested there. And in that moment, I understood. I understood. Not with logic, but with something older. A primal knowing. That penny wasn't currency. It was a contract. An agreement signed not in ink, but in awareness. I had looked. I had seen. And now I was bound. The line behind him, the hunched figures, they were the others. The ones who saw. Each with their own story. Each with their own regret. I was next. My legs moved without permission. Each step forward was a betrayal of sanity, but I couldn't stop. The air around me thickened, not with heat or smoke, but with memory. Ancient, heavy memory. I felt the weight of 1,000 eyes that had stared where they shouldn't. The beggar extended his hand further. I didn't take the coin. I couldn't. Instead, I asked, "Why me?" The wind stilled. The silence turned deafening. And then he spoke, not with lips, but through the shadows around us. "Because you listened when others walked. You looked when others turned away. You wondered when others forgot." The line behind him shifted. One of the hooded figures raised its face. I saw my own, hollow-eyed, drained. A version of myself trapped in an eternal loop of regret. My breath caught in my throat. I stepped back, but the beggar lowered his hand. The coin vanished, and the line dispersed. Slowly, fading into the night like mist. He remained. He wasn't going to drag me. Not yet. But I had been marked. I ran again. Not from fear, but from something worse. Recognition. I wasn't just a victim. I was a candidate. The type they wait for. The type who sees too much, who listens too long, who pokes holes in the veil and then pretends not to notice the light bleeding through. The following morning, something changed. My mirror didn't reflect me. Not at first. It showed the alley, the corner, and the beggar, standing still, waiting. I blinked, and my reflection returned, but I felt wrong, as if something else had stood in my place and had only just stepped aside. My reflection smiled for a second too long. My lips hadn't moved. I stopped using mirrors. I covered them, every last one. Not because I was scared of the beggar, but because I feared what might look back. I feared becoming one of them, one of the line, a face without a name, a regret without a story. The apartment turned colder with each passing day. Lights flickered even when unplugged. Electronics behaved erratically, TVs playing static during thunderstorms, radios whispering my name when tuned off. It wasn't haunting. It was claiming. Then came the knocks again. Only this time, not at the door. They came from inside the walls. 3 short, 3 slow, 1 long. A rhythm I later learned mimicked the tolling of bells at funerals in some old European churches. The kind of detail that shouldn't be in my head, unless someone had placed it there. And the dreams deepened. I was no longer just an observer. I was there, in that old church, walking barefoot on cold stone, dragging chains tied to memories that weren't mine. I saw a priest crying blood, begging the beggar for absolution. I saw a child offering their eyes for mercy. I saw myself, kneeling at the altar, holding not a coin but a mirror, watching as my face melted into his. One night, I awoke not in my bed, but in the alley. No memory of how I got there. Just me, the corner, and the echo of a coin spinning to a stop. I didn't scream. I couldn't. The rules were different now. I had become a part of the story, and stories don't get to rewrite themselves. They follow their path to the end. I left the city the next day. Packed nothing, took only what I had on me. Drove until the skyline disappeared, until the buildings became trees, until the air smelled like something untouched. But it didn't matter, because in every town I passed through, there he was, always in the corner of my eye. Sometimes a shadow under a street lamp, sometimes a hunched figure outside a gas station, sometimes just a faint knock on the motel wall when the night grew too still. I had become a wanderer, a man fleeing not a monster, but a moment. That one moment when my curiosity overruled the rules. When I looked, you might think this is a cautionary tale, a warning to trust the signs, obey the whispers, ignore the broken ones who beg for your gaze. But it's not. It's a map, a trail for the next. Because eventually, the beggar needs someone new. And I've been seeing things lately. On my reflection, on the edges of my vision, another face. Yours. It started subtly, the way rot creeps beneath paint. I'd be walking through a market or waiting at a bus stop, and I'd catch someone staring, not in suspicion or interest, but recognition, as if they saw something in me I hadn't accepted yet. One day, a little girl pointed at me and whispered, "That's the man who followed the coin." Her mother shushed her, but I saw the fear in her eyes too. They knew. Some people always know. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I was just paranoid. Maybe guilt had woven itself into my mind, feeding illusions. But the more I ignored it, the more obvious it became. The birds stopped flying near me. Dogs whimpered when I passed. My own voice began to sound like it belonged to someone else, like it echoed from a tunnel carved through someone else's memory. One night, I woke up with soil under my fingernails and a coppery taste in my mouth. There was dirt in my bed, grave dirt, the kind you don't mistake. I rushed to the bathroom, flicked the light on, and there he was, behind me. In the mirror, not the beggar, me, but older, hollow, lips stitched shut, and behind that version of myself, the line again, the others, just watching, waiting. They weren't haunting me. They were studying me. I was being tested. Something about that realization shifted everything. Fear gave way to clarity. I was no longer just prey, I was being groomed, prepared, the way you age wine before opening it. I wasn't supposed to run. I was supposed to unravel. That's when the doors stopped locking. I'd check them 3 times. 4, slide in the bolt, chain it. But in the morning, always ajar. The windows too. I'd feel cold air on my face at night, my heater off, my breath visible. Yet there was no wind, only the faint sound of whispering. Not voices, just breath, exhaling secrets in a language older than bones. I found scratches under my bed, not claw marks, lines, carvings. Hundreds of tally marks, etched in rows. Like someone or something had been counting the nights. My nights, watching them pass, marking each one like a prisoner does the bricks on their wall. One mark had been drawn with blood, and then the dreams took a different shape. I was no longer in the alley. I was under it, beneath the city, deep in a forgotten chamber where candles never died and walls whispered sins. The beggar sat on a throne of coins, not gold, but those small copper pennies, the ones people toss away without thought. Each one held a soul, a face. And as I approached, he held up a single coin and said, "This one is yours, still spinning." I asked what happened if it stopped. He said, "You take my seat." I woke up choking on a penny, a real one, in my throat. Pulled it out, coughing, trembling. Dated 1933, tarnished, old, but warm, like it had just been plucked from flesh. I began to lose time after that. Hours, sometimes full days. I'd find myself in unfamiliar neighborhoods with no idea how I got there. My phone always dead. My wallet untouched. My hands stained with ash. The ash of old things, sacred things, burnt and forgotten. I met someone once during one of those lost episodes, an old man selling books out of a rusted van on a dead-end road. He looked at me and said, "He marked you." I didn't deny it. I asked how he knew. He showed me his palms, branded with eyes, dozens, tattooed, burned, drawn, eyes everywhere. "He marked me too," he said, "but I closed the gate before the 13th day." I asked what gate. He only smiled. "If you don't know yet, you're already past it." Then he vanished. Not disappeared, just gone. One blink, and the van was empty, the air around me heavier. I started counting after that. I'm not sure why, but I did. And on the 13th day, I didn't sleep. I nailed the doors shut, burned sage, drew circles in salt. But the knocks still came, not on the walls, not on the doors, inside my chest. A heartbeat that wasn't mine. It pounded harder, faster, until I felt dizzy, until I collapsed. And when I opened my eyes, I was in the alley again. But different. It was raining pennies, slow, gentle, like ash. They didn't clink. They floated down, each one spinning in the air like they were choosing where to land. The beggar stood there, arms open, not beckoning, welcoming. And behind him, the line had become a circle, a ritual, a summoning. And I was the center. I didn't move. I asked, "What do you want from me?" His smile cracked wider than his face should allow. "To remember," he said. "Remember what?" He didn't answer. But the sky did. It opened with sound, not thunder, but 1,000 prayers spoken backward. A choir of regrets. Every scream that was ever swallowed. Every horror denied. Every eye that looked away when it should have stayed shut. And I saw it, what I had forgotten. Not from this life, but the last. Because the beggar wasn't a stranger to me. He was my twin. The twin I had drowned in a basin during a ritual I thought was long buried. A mistake. A crime. A pact broken. And now he wanted balance. There was no running from what I had seen. Not anymore. My legs felt like pillars of stone. My breath a shallow echo in lungs that no longer felt like mine. The alley was no longer just an alley. It was a shrine, a grave, a gateway carved into the fabric of the city by secrets too old to name. and in its center stood the truth I had tried to ignore. I had known the beggar long before I first laid eyes on him, not in memory, but in blood, in fate. The revelation shattered the illusion of my life like glass underfoot. I began to see traces of him everywhere, not just in faces but in shapes. A twisted shadow behind a door, a pattern in broken tiles, whispers riding the breeze from church bells that no longer rang. The city itself had turned. Every street I once walked with indifference now seemed to curve toward that cursed alley, as though the entire grid of concrete had been designed for this reckoning. People began to vanish around me, not all at once, but gradually. The barista at the corner cafe stopped showing up. My neighbor's dog howled for days before the apartment went silent. When I knocked, no one answered. Their mail piled up. Lights remained off. A city block can feel like a ghost town when you're the last soul that still remembers who used to live there. I checked the news, the obituaries, the missing persons reports. Nothing. No mention. No alarm. It was as if they had been erased from the book of the living. One by one, like names crossed off a list I was never meant to see. And in each instance, I remembered their eyes. Each had looked at me with subtle unease, as if sensing what clung to my skin, as if seeing what followed me in the dark. I tried to confess, to a priest, to a friend, to anyone who might understand. But the moment I began to speak, my voice failed. Words collapsed in my throat like crumbling pillars. I would start to choke, my vision blurred, and every time I'd catch a glimpse of a coin, just a flash, resting on the tongue of the person I was trying to speak to, as if to say, "It's already too late." Desperate, I returned to the alley once more. But it had changed. Where once there had been grime and decay, now there was symmetry. Candles burned in small recesses along the brick walls, wax unmelted, flames unmoving, as if time itself bent around them. The beggar sat atop a throne made of folded coats, stitched with rosaries and hair. His eyes, those bottomless wells of knowing, locked on mine the moment I stepped forward. "You remember now," he said. I didn't nod. I didn't need to. "Then you know the price." I whispered, "I'm not ready." His laugh wasn't loud. It was deep, ancient. It echoed from the stones. None of us were. He rose slowly, each joint cracking like old wood, and behind him the circle closed in, not with menace but inevitability, hooded figures, empty hands, feet wrapped in linen soaked with stories, their faces hidden, but I knew them, the missing, the forgotten, the erased. One stepped forward and handed me a mirror. It didn't show my reflection. It showed the alley, years ago, 2 children playing near a drain. One slipped, the other hesitated. The coin was there, a decision made, a brother left behind, swallowed by the dark. The survivor ran, grew up, forgot, until the circle opened again. The mirror cracked in my hands, and I bled, not from pain, but recognition. The alley wasn't cursed by some ancient force. It was haunted by debt, one that had been passed down, fed by choices made in silence. I wasn't the first to carry it, but I might be the last. The beggar approached and placed a coin in my palm. This time I didn't drop it. It pulsed, alive, heavy with judgment. He leaned in and whispered, "Spin it." I hesitated, then obeyed. The coin danced in my hand faster than it should. Light bent around it, and when it finally stopped, I saw only one word burned into its surface. Remain. I looked up. They were gone. The alley empty, the candles out. Only the coin remained. Still warm, still watching. I walked home in silence. My phone rang once, then died. My apartment door was locked, but my keys didn't work. My name no longer appeared on the mailbox. No one saw me as I passed. It was like I had become air. I still cast a shadow, but it moved slightly out of sync. And in every reflective surface, mirrors, windows, water, I saw not myself but the alley. Always the alley, the throne, the coin. A debt remembered. And I understood. I hadn't escaped. I had taken his place. I don't dream anymore, not in the way most people do. Sleep has become a space between echoes, a place where the alley stretches endlessly and the coin never stops spinning. There's no sky, no ground, just that liminal zone where time drips instead of flows. And in every corner of it he waits. The beggar, no longer seated, no longer still. He walks now, slowly, purposefully, as if retracing the steps of everyone who ever stared too long. During the day, I walk too, but I don't choose where I go. The city pulls me. One street leads to another, then to stairs I don't recall climbing and doors I never meant to open. And behind each of them, a piece of something bigger, a child laughing, then crying, a woman praying while holding a coin to her lips, a man vomiting pennies. I see them all now. The ones who saw the eyes, the ones who owed. I'm not the only one trapped between layers. I see the others sometimes. They pass by like shadows and reflections, never meeting my gaze, never slowing down. But I know they're like me. We're the ones who didn't pay with memory. We stayed. We inherited the silence. We became its voice. One night I tried to leave the city, just board a train any direction, anywhere. But when the doors opened, the station was empty. No staff, no passengers. Just rows of benches and a single light flickering above a vending machine filled only with coins. Not candy, not drinks, just coins. And behind the machine, scratched into the metal wall, a message. You looked, you listen, you stay. I don't know who wrote it, but I know who whispered it into their ear. There are moments I forget I'm not alive in the usual way. I'll reach for coffee only to watch my hand pass through the cup. Or I'll try to speak to someone on the street and they'll shiver, then hurry away, rubbing their arms like they walked through a patch of cold wind. Sometimes I scream, not for help, but to remind myself I can still make noise. Sometimes I can't. And every time I pass a coin on the ground, I hesitate. Not because I fear what it means, but because I know what it costs. If I pick it up, I'll remember. And remembering isn't freedom. It's the toll. I live now in a kind of repetition. My apartment, what's left of it, is a shell. The walls whisper, not words, but sounds. A match striking, a footstep halting, a breath caught halfway through a prayer. The floorboards shift like lungs exhaling. The mirror won't reflect me anymore. Only the alley. Still. Always. I sometimes wonder if the beggar was once like me, a man who saw too much, who owed too deeply, who tried to run. Maybe he too passed through a coin's judgment. Maybe he lost. Or maybe he won by becoming the warning, the gatekeeper, the final face before the descent. One night, a woman entered the alley, young, brave. Her eyes glowed with defiance. She wasn't afraid. Not yet. She saw me. Not as a man, as something else. A guardian, perhaps. A guide. She stepped forward and said only one word. Why? I didn't answer. I couldn't. I watched as she knelt before the empty throne, placed a coin on her tongue, closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she was gone. And I was seated. Again. The throne isn't a chair, it's a role, a curse, a continuity passed down by silence and sight. We each serve our term. And then, the alley chooses another. But tonight something's different, I feel it. A shift in the wind. The way the candles burn, faster, hungrier. The stones beneath my feet are warmer. Like the city is waking up, not from sleep, but from denial. And down the alley I hear steps. Slow, careful, hesitant. Someone else is coming. Another who stared too long. Another who heard the whispers between car horns and elevator doors. Another who found a coin and dared to ask what it meant. The throne prepares itself. The circle closes. And as I rise to pass on the burden, I whisper only what I was once told. Don't look him in the eyes. But they will. They always do. So if one day you walk alone and the alley you're certain didn't exist yesterday now lies just ahead, Don't follow the echo. Don't chase the flicker of gold on the ground. The coin isn't lost, it's placed, waiting for someone who still believes they are just passing through. Because once you see him, you're part of it. The silence that wraps around you won't be broken by screams or prayers. It will become you. And long after your name is forgotten, the city will remember your footsteps, your hesitation, your debt. The throne will remember. And when the time comes, you will sit. This was Convent Nightmares, though tonight no nuns prayed and no church doors slammed shut. But faith still lingered in the spaces between stories. If your lights are still on and your breath hasn't vanished into mist, leave a like, subscribe for more tales best left untold, and tell us where in the world you're watching from, so the next shadow knows where to begin. And remember, some coins aren't spent. They choose you, and some beggars never blink.